Salam alaikum. I'd like to welcome you all to the MCB's Islam and Racial Justice Conference Day 2. Many of you would have heard of the Proudly Muslim and Black initiative, which was launched last year by the MCB. As part of this, we've organized this 2-day conference, which had started yesterday, and I hope that many of you had the chance to join us yesterday on our discussions with regards to Islam and racial justice. We are looking forward to continuing this discussion today with our theme, with particular focus on the youth today, and I'm proud to be part of the team of diverse group of Muslims that have worked on bringing this initiative together to support a lasting change within our community. Therefore, I would like to again warmly welcome you on behalf of MCB, our sponsors and delivery partners who are shown on this slide. We'd like to start today with an opening prayer, which will be delivered by Latifat Hassan. If I can ask Latifa to join us, that would be great.
She will be doing a recitation of the Holy Quran. So Latifa, are you there?
Yeah.
Oh,
So Latifa, are you there with us?
Yeah.
Feel free to start when you're ready. Jazakallah khair.
I'm sorry, my camera's not turning on. Hold on. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبؤست الجبال بأسا فكانت هباء منبثا فكنتم أزواجا ثلاثا وأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضوعة متكئين عليها متقابلين يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأبارك وكأس من معين صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khair. Latifa, that was a beautiful recitation.
Thank you.
May Allah bless our gathering here today and help us to fulfill our purpose both in this life and the hereafter, and help us achieve a lasting, sustaining change within our community that helps us all. So now I'd like to invite Rashida Hassan, who's the Assistant General of the MCB, to formally welcome and explain a little bit about why we're hosting this conference today.
Thank you very much, Sister Nada. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I welcome you to the second edition, actually, of the Proudly Muslim and Black conference. It's the second time we'll be having it, and this is the second day of the event, which started yesterday. And as you would have seen from the publicity and everything that's been shared around today, the conference is about discussing Islam and racial justice. And yesterday we had a very, very, very interesting and well-attended and very interactive session where we discussed a lot of issues around Islam and racial justice. And in the spirit of what we discovered, what led to the Proudly Muslim and Black initiative, it's one of the work of the MCB to actually engage with the community at large. And it is true that we all know that Black Muslims generally have not been well placed to so to speak within the community generally, and especially within the, when we talk about Black Muslims within the Muslim community. And so the MCB, as part of its work, has been trying to reach out to the community and to ensure that we are able to bridge that gap, you know, that is within the Muslims, and we all know that in Islam there shouldn't be anything like discrimination based on color, based on ethnicity or anything. What distinguishes us from one another is actually our good deeds, and that is why Proudly Muslim and Black is a very, very important initiative within the MCB. And last year we had the first edition of the event, which focused more on exploring the history and the heritage and contribution of Black Muslim communities to the UK. And then, you know, this year, against the background of everything that's been happening, the Black Lives Matter campaign, the George Floyd issue, and so many other things that have been happening before now, we thought it was very important to talk about racial justice and to actually highlight how Islam wants us to relate with one another. And one other thing that came out from the conference we had last year was the need for us to actually engage the young people within the community. And for that reason, this year we decided that it was very important for us to have a day specifically focused on engaging with the young Muslims, especially young Black Muslims, and to share in their experience of racism, unconscious biases, and, you know, all those kind of all those terms that, you know, we've heard people talking about. Yes, we all talk about it, but a lot of time the young people don't have the platform to actually express or discuss how they experience these things. And so we thought it was very important to have a youth conference where we can discuss some of this very important issue. And before now, we also had community briefing where we talked, where we tried to look at issues within the Black Muslim communities that needed to be highlighted. And that led us to the work on the report, which we are going to talk about later on as the session progresses. And so I'll just say, just let us all relax. We've got a number of young people here today that will be sharing their experience, as well as a number of stakeholders and people who work within the community with young people to share their experience and to tell us about some of these things and how they have been engaging with them within the community. So we've got Brother Ismael, Brother Mamadou Tal, and a host of them. And of course, we also have the young people from different age group who will be sharing their experience. So I would say, let us all relax. Let's be part of this conversation, and please, let's talk about these things in a friendly and relaxed. Of course, we'll be talking about very difficult things, but we should do them in a way that is positive and progressive. So thank you very much. I welcome you to this session, and I'll hand you over back to Sister Nada.
Jazakallah khair, Rashida, for that introduction. And I feel that we all agree with everything that you said, especially about the creation of space for youths to share both their thoughts and their struggles with us, so that we are able to improve on the environment that we live in. So without further ado, we will start the conference. And I'd like to just share a couple of basic housekeeping rules with you all to make sure that the conversation is as interactive and as informative as it can be. So for the questions, there's a functionality on Zoom where there is a Q&A section. So I'd like you all, if you can, to put all your questions within the Q&A box. This will allow us to see all the questions in one place and to pick it up. And then if you have any comments or insights or even thoughts about the topics that's being shared, please share it within the comments so that everyone else can be part of the conversation we're having today. And I'd like to encourage you to also take the opportunity to ask questions throughout the presentations. And we will also give opportunities to pick up the questions through the presentations. So I will let you know when these opportunities are through the schedule. And then finally, with all the comments and the questions, let's try to be respectful of each other. We all have our own unique experiences and ideas, and it's important to share them in a respectful and a mindful way. So for today, we have 2 parts to this conference. Part 1 will focus on the racial justice presentations. We've got 5 fantastic speakers lined up, as well as contributions from young youth who will be sharing their experiences, and you'll be amazed to find out about the different ages and walks of life that our youths who are participating with us today have experienced. So I'm really excited to share that with you today. And through the 5 presentations, we will have 2 opportunities for question and answer. There will be an opportunity for question and answer after the 3rd presentation, and also at the end of the 5 presentations. And then once, hopefully that will take us through to around 7:45, where we will go on to the 2nd part of the conference, which is where we will have a soft launch of the Proudly Muslim and Black 2020 report, which details our view of the Black Muslim experience within the UK. And we've started highlighting some of the contributions within that report yesterday, and today's session will be a continuation of that. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you as well. You will have an opportunity to have questions and answers with the contributors who will be presenting today. And hopefully that would bring our conference to an end. For the 5 presentations today, we've got, as Rashida mentioned, we've got the first topic will be by Ismael himself, and it will be around young Black Muslims and anti-Blackness. And it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Ismael himself, because I've seen a lot of his work within the community. He's a co-founder and a director of the Islam Project. He also facilitates a UK-wide project with faith forums, and he also co-founded the UK Black Muslim Awards. And mashallah, through all these great projects, he's been involved in changing and positively impacting the lives of Black Muslims, and particularly Black Muslim youths in the UK. So I'm really glad that we have him here with us today to present. And Ismail, inshallah, will be joined by 3 fantastic speakers. We've got Latifa Toho, Barakat Aziz, and Unaisa Baker. Latifa is a 2nd-year student studying history at Queen Mary University of London. Barakat is a 15-year-old student in Nottingham, and he's quite passionate about making a difference in his community and actively volunteers in community events, which mashallah is amazing to see. And Unaisa, mashallah, is a passionate university graduate. She's a motivational speaker, and she's also part of the Salam project, and she leads the female engagement for the project, and she's currently working on a collaborative Sisters FM radio station project that inshallah will be launched in January 2021, so make sure you look out for that. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Brother Ismail to start the discussion around young Black Muslims and anti-Blackness.
Thank you. Salam alaikum, sister. Nada, Isa, thank you for eloquently bigging me up. Jazakallah, I don't deserve it. And thank you very much for your eloquent hosting. Is it okay if I could have the facility to share, please? Share my screen. Thank you, everyone. Salam alaikum, everyone. I hope everyone's enjoying it. Very encouraged. While I'm trying to get the host not to disable me to share my screen, I would like to shout out the MCB, and I would like to especially shout out Sister Rashidat Hassan and Brother Hassan Judy for working hard in building bridges in communities. It's easy for us to complain about racism in the Muslim community. I'm one of those who've been guilty of critiquing the MCB for the lack of engagement with Black Muslims. But since Sister Rashidat Hassan has come on board, since Brother Hassan Judy have come on board, I can't complain no more, because they're not only talking the talk, they're also doing the action. So basically, I'd like to shout them out. So basically, this is about anti-Blackness and racism within the Muslim community. Okay, now, according to the scholars that I speak to, and I'm sure many people have heard this, we said that Shaitan was the first racist. And many people said, oh, brothers and sisters, there's no racism in Islam. Islam is one, no racism. Yes, ideally we know in Islam there's no racism, but sadly among Muslims, racism exists. Not only racism exists, misogyny exists, tribalism exists among Muslims. So we're here to talk about racism. So according to the verse of the Quran, chapter 7, between 11 and 7 and 12, we see that where the Satan said, I'm not bowing down to him, he's made from mud and I'm made from smokeless fire. Now, what is racism and unconscious bias? Many people are saying these words and not really fully understanding the meaning. So racism is the belief that groups of humans possess different behavior traits, and depending on their physical features and so forth, based on their race or heritage. And this is according to the Oxford University Language Dictionary. And also unconscious bias. Unconscious bias is learned stereotypes that are automatic, unintentionally, deeply ingrained, that influence behavior. Now, the question is, what do you think Black Muslims go through with Asian and Arab Muslim brothers and sisters? Normally I'll do this as a talk, but this is a reality among our communities. I'll say my personal experience. As someone of Jamaican heritage, I've embraced Islam. I used to go to a mosque. We used to work in finance, and then I used to do poetry performances in the evening and weekends. That's another story. So people assume, because I was a Jamaican convert to Islam, they assumed that I embraced Islam in prison. Because people used to say, oh, all the Jamaican Muslims, they took Shahada in prison. So that's a form of racism that I've been through. And my daughter's been through racism, and my daughter's first experience of racism were at the hands of so-called Muslims. Now, these are certain case studies that people have contacted the Salam project to talk about racism that they've received, okay? Now, organizations that I work with in partnerships that have gone to so-called mainstream Muslim organizations to ask for help or sponsorship, and they've been told things like, my trustees are racist, they don't like Black people, and they won't allow me to support you. And that's head of a so-called Muslim organization. Our kids, there's a famous story of a so-called imam in Birmingham who said, oh, you're trying to dress and talk Black. And there was an issue when someone was trying to negotiate, mediate between a person of Asian heritage and a Black person of Afro-Caribbean heritage to get married, and they brought in an imam. The imam was mediating, then the imam went off and spoke to the Asian family and said in Urdu, what are you doing? I would never let a daughter of mine marry a Black man, I'll kick them down the stairs. But because one of the Afro-Caribbean brothers, he understood Urdu because he does a lot of business with Pakistanis, he was able to translate. So now, racism within the Muslim Ummah comes from many various places. One of the places where it comes from is racist interpretation of religious text. Now, according to this book called The Reorient, it goes into how the curse of Ham, which was used within the Christian society of racism, where they wrongly translated that the curse of Ham happened, and then when Ham was cursed, who was one of the sons of Noah, alayhi salam, that he turned Black, and this justified them in mistreating and ill-treating Black people worldwide. But I've read the curse of Ham story within Muslim text and Muslim so-called scholarly books too. And there's further racist interpretation of Islamic religious text. Like, for example, the most hateful amongst the creation of Allah is one Black man. And I've read stories that, oh, there's a jinn called Blackie. And there's another story of a Sahaba, Abu Darda, reported that he said, look out for the Black race as if they were coals. And there's many disrespectful hadiths written about Black people, okay? And basically someone brought this to the attention to a sheikh called Sheikh Faraz al-Rabbani and said, I was shocked to read a number of hadiths relating from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam criticizing, mentioning bad traits of Black people. Are these true? And this is what Sheikh Faraz al-Rabbani said. The Imams of Hadith, including Ibn al-Jawzi, Ibn al-Qayyim, these are good muadiths, scholars of Hadiths, who have said any Hadiths that disrespect Black people are daif, okay? They're unfounded and they're false, okay? But sadly, many of our Islamic scholars have actually quote these Hadiths to communities and to people. Racism discouraged in Islamic teachings, we all know this, so I'm just quoting from Quran there. And as we know, in the last sermon of the Prophet, Salam, he discouraged racism in communities. Now, according to Sheikh Michael Mumissa, who's a Cambridge University academic, he's also stated in the same book, Islamic Law, Theory, Interpretation, a great book he's written, and he states that Hadith scholars, saying Ibn Abi Hatim and Al-Razi Ibn Qayyim, are unanimous that traditions which is biased against Black people will be classified as spurious. And for those don't know what spurious means, it means false. Now, Now, sadly, rampant among so-called mainstream Muslim communities, especially within the Arab and Asian community, they just seem to quote Bilal, may Allah be pleased with him. It's very rare I hear Muslim communities, even so-called imams and scholars, quoting other Sahabas who were of African heritage. So these are just some, like Ayman, may Allah be pleased with her, who was the foster mother of the Prophet, ﷺ, and she was also the midwife as well. And also the story of Ubaidah ibn al-Samit, who was an Ansar, and he was a person, is one of the scribes of the Prophet ﷺ as well. And also Ammar bin Yasser and Zayd ibn Haritha. So Zayd, I've heard many scholars and imams saying that he was just a slave. But what I don't hear them saying is that he was not only a slave, he was the adopted son of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he's the only Sahaba given by name is quoted in the Al-Quran, okay? So in the Quran, chapter 33, verse 37, he's the only Sahaba mentioned by name. And not only that, when we look into when the Quran was transferred from an oral tradition and to be scribed, he was the supervisor in charge of the scribing of the Holy Quran in the book format we have it today. Okay. Now, to learn more about Black Sahabas and great Black Muslims in history are three brilliant books, like Uthman al-Jahiz, The Glory of the Blacks, Illuminating the Darkness by a wonderful brother called Habib Akande, and The Virtues of Blacks and Abyssinians. History of Anti-Blackness within the Persian culture was written the book called Negative Image of Blacks in Some Medieval Iranian Writings by Minu Southgate. These books goes into the history and where the anti-Blackness stemmed from in Persian culture. History of anti-Blackness within the Arabian Peninsula. There's a book called Arab Racism in Kush by Bolgay Deng, and goes into where it stems from within the Arabian Peninsula. Racism and anti-Black stereotypes persist in the Arabian literature. It reveals racial anxiety, okay, celebrated by so-called Arab authors. Okay, now the history of anti-Blackness within the Asian subcontinent. So when I'm saying Asia, I'm talking about among India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, because before they were just known as India. Now, these books, this book called Prejudice, Discrimination, Racism Against Africans, and the Siddhis in India. The Siddhis are a group of dark-skinned Asians, and some are African Asians, and they call the Siddhis. They've now tried to give them some new politically correct name, and it goes into the history of the racism they go through today, not just last week. They've been going through this for centuries till today. And TRT World, they done an expose on this, and there's a story that says, and one of the people said, prejudice, discrimination, and racism among Africans and against the Siddhis in India, and it's edited by Ibrahim Diallo. History of anti-blackness in the caste system in India. Now, as we know, the caste system comes from the Hindu culture. Sadly, it has come over among Muslims from the Asian subcontinent. There's a big, whether people like to pretend it's not there, but it's there. There's a caste system among the Asian Muslim community, and whereby at the bottom are the dark-skinned Black Asians. Okay. Now, root cause of anti-blackness within Asian cultures is a book here called The Dalits. The Dalits, it's the politically correct name for the untouchables, the Black Indians, the dark-skinned Indians. And this book goes into it and it explains where it comes from, the superstitions, the stories, the folklores that always made Black is bad and white is good. And this is another book that goes into many Indian folklores among Muslims as well as Hindus, as well as the Buddhists and all Asian religions, about how Blacks are depicted as jinns, demons, evil shapeshifters. And this is where I believe a lot of the racism stems from within the Asian community. Now, as an antidote, I believe that Black Muslims, we need to start learning about the Black Muslim history of India. There's a book written by Dr. Ivan van Sertima. He's written a book called African Presence in Early Asia, where he talks about there were African rulers of India, of the Indian subcontinent, one of them known as Malik Ambar. And there's more Black history of India as well. And also the elephant in the room. Slavery existed in India before the transatlantic slavery and after the transatlantic slavery, okay? And these books show about the slavery in the Arab world and slavery in the Persian world too. Now, there's more Black Indian Islamic history about these were the Black sultans from East Africa who governed the whole of India. Not just India today, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, okay? There's a lady called Sylvia Diouf. She done a story for the BBC where she talked about, she's doing a worldwide exhibition on Africans in India. Where can Black Muslims go if they have faced racism? There's a new initiative called the Black British Islamic Bureau. Here's a telephone number. Also, lovely sister Sakina from the Black Muslim Forum. Also, there's a Black Muslim Women's Healing Collective that is controlled by the Rabbani Project, the Sisters from the Pearls of Islam. How can we challenge racism in the community? Okay. I believe regular anti-Blackness training of imams, community leaders, facilitate regular training of mosques, madrasas, and Muslim charities, institutions, exchange programs. Whenever a complaint is made, we work together to mediate and get an apology, to educate each other about each other's cultures and heritage, and challenge racism, rhetoric, stigma, openly and privately. Sorry. So yes, that's just a short introduction about anti-Blackness and racism within the Muslim community. And hopefully with the help of the MCB, Sister Rasheedat Hassan and Brother Hassan Judy, we can work together to eradicate it. And hopefully the people here on the panel, we can all work together to make it happen, inshallah. Jazakallah, Sister Nada. Apologies if I went a bit over.
That's okay, Jazakallah khair. Your talk was very informative, and I personally liked all the resources that you've shared that detail incidents of racism in different cultures, as well as the Islamic teaching that discourages racism. I'd like to just now invite the youth contributors for our discussion around the topic. That's Latifa, Barakat, and Unaisa. If you guys could join us, that would be great.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
This is Unaisa. I can't share my video for some reason, but it's fine. I'm just going to get started, inshallah. So I'm the Female Youth Engagement Officer, alhamdulillah, and I'm just going to share some of my experiences with what I've experienced in terms of racism. So I am 21, alhamdulillah, and I was raised in Saudi Arabia from a very young age. And I think my experience with racism started off so earlier on, I didn't even know it was racism because I was so little. But so I attended a Quran school and an Arabic school from a very young age, alhamdulillah. And I noticed straight away that when I was learning Arabic, girls would often think I was Saudi like them because of how I spoke, my accent and the way I look. And they would treat me very similar until they saw my parents. So my dad is black, alhamdulillah, and my mum is Yemeni white, but they would treat me very differently when they found out I wasn't like them. They would make fun of me, call me names, and I just didn't understand that at a young age. As I grew older, I moved Quran schools, I moved schools, I attended international schools, and I was around people quite like myself, but that was for actual academic study. But Quran school-wise, there was always a consistent struggle because it was the case of I have siblings who are darker than me, siblings who are lighter than me, and the Arabs, majority of the students who were just completely Arab, they would treat you very differently when they found out that you weren't Arab. I think I was 16 at the time, and there was a girl, I was talking to her in Arabic, and then my sister came up to me, my younger sister, who's, we look very different, and she said, she was just talking to me, and the girl said to me, "Is this your sister?" And I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "It can't be." She was literally shocked, and we were so used to this. So I went to my teacher and I was like, "What's my last name?" She said, "Baker." I was like, "Okay, what's my sister's last name?" She was like, "Baker." And the girl still wasn't convinced we were related. They even went as far as to pour water on my sister and like rub her skin to check that she was actually black. And then I started speaking English to my sister, and the Arab girl, she instantly changed her attitude towards me. She was like, "Oh my goodness, where are you from?" And I was like, "I'm from London." And she, before telling her I was actually from London, I actually said to her, "Guess." And she said to me, "Oh, you must be Indian," and she must be African. And I was like, "No, we're not." And she just didn't believe it until we started speaking English. And we would often be told not to speak English outside of the house because Arabs would treat you differently. Sometimes they would charge you extra. But my experience with racism in the Middle East and the UK have been very, very different. I actually think I experienced it way more in the Middle East, but I was so used to it, I didn't really understand I didn't understand it. It was just natural. And then when I moved here, I was a police cadet for 3 years. Again, I was still, it kind of went over my head until we started going to competitions, and we would compete against other boroughs. And because I was involved in the Tower Hamlets borough, which is quite, it's quite mixed. When we would go to competitions, we were surrounded by other cadets, and we noticed that a lot of the boroughs were predominantly white, and we were kind of considered a joke because of how mixed we were. They didn't expect to see Muslims, they didn't expect to see Black Muslims, they just didn't expect to see, people who were from different places. So when we would do training and things like that, they were a bit harsher. They weren't that nice. They excluded us. And then I went further into police training just to kind of test out if I was, capable. And my friend went before me, and she told me she had an interviewer who was a white male, and we all had to go through the same procedure of being trained on how the questions are. It's very hardcore. And she was a head cadet. She was a head cadet for many years, and she didn't get in. And then I went for my interview, and I happened to have a Black female Muslim police officer, and she interviewed me, and I passed. And I remember leaving, and police officers who trained me from my borough, they were white. I remember leaving, and I told them, they asked me, who did I get as an interviewer? And I said, I got a Black Muslim woman. And they were like, "Oh, that's really lucky." And it just, again, it went over my head until I grew, I got older, and I realized that a lot of us are treated differently because of where we're from and how we look. And I just didn't like it. It made me really angry for a while. And I've gotten a lot of, "You're really well spoken for a Black person," or "You're really, where are you from? Like, you sound white." And I think it's just really interesting to see the differences between the discrimination in the West and Middle East. But it's definitely, it makes you feel like you want to hold back in the things you go for because of how you're treated. But I just feel as though, to end it on a positive note, I just feel as though that is literally the worst thing that you could do. That is literally would make them win. Anyone who discriminates you against, for any reason, the best thing you can do is actually give in and be like, let me hold back, and not actually go as far as I can because they expect, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So just, I think, advice I don't want to end it on like a negative note, but advice to young people, or even people older than me who, you know, they daily go through these experiences. I mean, I take my dad's an inspiration to me. He, you know, in Saudi, he was treated differently all the time because of his skin color, and we could see it, but he just kept persevering. So I would just say, just do what you love, do what you believe in, and always know that, you know, no matter your religion or your faith, no one has the right to treat you any less than you are because you are different. There's not a single version of you out there. There's just one of you, and you need to give yourself the opportunity to be you. So yeah, that's my experience. I hope it's helped and you've enjoyed listening.
Jazakallah khair, Unaisa. Thank you so much for sharing that powerful experience, both in the West and in the East, and how different the racism is. And I really admire your strength to continue engaging regardless of the negative experiences that you've been exposed to. So mashallah, and wish you all the best with your studies. Thank you so much for sharing. If I can just quickly call on Barakat next to share his experience with us as well, if that's okay.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Barakat and I'm 16. So my camera's not working. I don't know how to really turn it on. Apologies.
That's okay. What we'll try and do is we'll try and help with that. But that's okay. You can carry on talking and hopefully it'll come on.
Okay. Okay. So I just wanted to start off by saying that I am a girl and I do go secondary school in Nottingham. And throughout my primary education, I was the only Black Muslim that went to my primary school. And there was a lot of Asian Muslims that went there. And I wanted to explore my religion. So I started wearing a scarf in like year 5, year 6. And through that, I would get questioned about how religious I was and how I was Muslim. And I didn't really think anything of it until I started doing it in year 7 as well. And it was like they only questioned me because of my skin color, and they questioned how religious I was, because I felt as if they felt like I was stupid in some way because I was a Black Muslim. But in fact, I've grown up Muslim my whole life. I don't know anything apart from it. My mom's Muslim, my grandparents are Muslim, everyone I know is a Black Muslim. And it just kind of baffled me to see why would they only ask me, but they wouldn't ask their fellow Asian Muslims if they were religious as me, because I knew my stuff and I knew what I was saying and I knew what I was doing. But they will always seem to question me and make snide remarks. So with them, I found it extremely, really hard to make friends. But mashallah, I do now have a few Asian Muslim friends, and they don't see color and they just see me for who I am. But growing up, I really didn't like my year 6, year 7 ages. I didn't really understand why it was me that was getting questioned so much because of my skin color. So yeah.
I think there's a prompt on the screen, if you don't mind clicking on, which will hopefully enable your camera. And I just want to say that it's very commendable that you are sharing this experience with us. And yes, we can see you now.
Okay.
Carry on. Jazakallah khair for sharing.
No problem. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk about it.
No, we're happy to have you here with us. And again, Jazakallah khair for sharing. But yeah, carry on. You were talking about how you were always questioned.
Yeah, I was always questioned about my faith, as if like because of my skin color, they thought that I wasn't religious enough and like I was just doing it. Well, in fact, I've grown up Muslim my whole life. All I know is Islam.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, why are they questioning me and not their fellow Asian friends that are with me? I don't know. It was just like really weird.
And how did you deal with that? And then how did that also influence, obviously, your work that you've been doing in the community?
I just honestly ignored it because this is my faith and this is what I have to do. And like, I just want to show other Black female Muslims that nothing's gonna stop you and that you can carry on doing what you need to do, because this is your faith. After all, there's no one that needs to question what you do as long as you're doing good, because in the end, it is gonna be all down to Allah who judges you, not anyone else.
Very true and beautifully said. That is very true. Jazakallah khair, Barakah, for sharing. I know we're going to hear from you later on today. So I'll just move on quickly to Latifa, who's a second year student studying history at Queen Mary. Latifa, when you're ready, please share with us your experiences and your views on racism within the community.
Well, my experience with racism within the Muslim community is, I think my first kind of, what I remember first kind of exposure to such racism was whenever I get told, oh, you're not like any Somali girls, I'm of Somali descent. And then I was questioned why they would just say that to me. And then I think it was one of my teachers, she was a Muslim, an Asian Muslim. She said, oh, you're not like any other Somali girls. And I asked her why. She said, oh, you're more timid compared to other Somali girls who she labeled as like loud and rambunctious. And then I kind of got this idea that they label Somali girls who are loud as more deviant. And I personally, I know a lot of them, and I know they're not deviant, they just have a loud kind of personality. But it's kind of like an indirect racist like comment towards me. It's like you don't really think about it, but once you do, you realize that they're not really meaning it as a compliment, but really just like a basically backhanded compliment. And I think another point is like the notion that I can only be either Black or Muslim. And I got that from like recently with the Black Lives Movement. I don't know what it was, but I saw a lot of it on Twitter where a lot of Asian or Arab like Twitter accounts would say like, why would we support the Black Lives Movement when they don't support something that was happening in Yemen or something like that? So they just equate Blackness and Muslim as like two separate entities. And it kind of just gives me a little bit of an identity crisis because I support both causes, yet they just tend to separate it. So I think that is like my experience, is just that.
SubhanAllah. And I agree with strongly with the final point that you made about the feeling that you can sometimes feel you have to choose between your Muslim and your Black identities to fulfill or to agree with the generally more commonly accepted view by the Muslim community, especially when it came to BLM. So I completely understand that. I'm also from a Somali descent, and I completely understand all of the struggles you went through in school and how if you're slightly different than what commonly is known as the personality traits for your particular ethnicity, you're slightly isolated from everyone else and you start being questioned. So thank you, Latifa. Thank you so much for sharing that and resonating with some of the experiences that I had as a child. Thank you so much for our youth contributors and Ismael for that session. If you guys can see the chat, all the points that you guys have raised have resonated with many of our attendees today, and a lot of people are sharing their experiences as well as commending your choice to share with us your experiences today. And now I'd like to move on to the second session, which will discuss unconscious bias and microaggressions among young non-Black teens. which I think really follows nicely onto from our previous presentation. This will be presented by the fantastic Amina Uwais. Amina is a writer, content creator, software engineer. I'm so pleased to have another engineer with us today presenting. She's also a third of the Black Muslim Girl podcast, TBMG, which I follow and I love. And it's a space for Black Muslims to vibe, elevate, and educate each other. I'm also pleased to invite to join Amina today, Aziza Hassan and Abdul Karim Adam. Aziza is a 17-year-old student who's currently studying International Baccalaureate, which is an alternative to sixth form, and she hopes to study material science and engineering at university. She's also a writer of poems, and she participates with other Black Muslim girls in a group called Shades of Hijabi. Amazing name. Abdul Karim is a 16-year-old full-time student, and he's passionate about the community and actively engages in his local mosque and activities that they run. He's also a teaching assistant at his local masjid Islamic classes in Nottingham, mashallah. So I'll invite now Amina to share with us her presentation before facilitating the discussion with two young contributors, Aziza and Abdul Karim.
Great. Assalamu alaikum, guys. Thank you for having me here on this platform. And yes, I can share my screen now. Alhamdulillah. Can you guys hear me okay? Wait.
Yep, we can hear you well.
So let me just, can you see my screen?
Yes, can I recommend that you make it full screen so that it's easier to read?
Yeah, I'm just about to. Okay, so my name is Amina. I'm a software engineer and content creator. So today I want to talk about unconscious bias and microaggressions. This is something that I can personally relate to a lot, navigating different industries for the past 4 years as a Black, visibly Muslim woman. So I'm just going to break down a bit more about what unconscious bias and microaggression entails and how that starts from a very young age. So hope you guys find it useful. So I think it's important to break down the two main types of bias. So you've got conscious bias, which is a prejudice in favor or against one thing, person, or group of people compared to another. Usually it's unfair. And this comes down to something that clicked with me as I grew up. And for a long time in society, it tends to show that white people are the default of what it is to function in a society, and everyone else belongs to the category other. And so there are structural systems in place where you will see examples of conscious biases towards particular communities and groups of people, if not individuals as well. And then you've got unconscious bias, and this is more prevalent in society because
apologies for the interruption.
Someone trying to say something?
No, I think it was just feedback from something. Apologies, carry on.
No worries. So unconscious bias is a bit more prevalent in society because it's very subtle, it's very ingrained in the systems that we function around and navigate. So it's very similar to conscious biases, but it's a bit more subtle. So it comes in the form of stereotypes. It targets certain groups, but it's done so in a way that almost makes you double take before you actually understand what it is that you've just experienced. So it stems from having these unconscious thoughts and opinions towards people that don't look like you. And sometimes you don't realize that you're contributing to that. So those are the two main types of biases, and this is how it's broken down. So from what I understand, unconscious bias and microaggressions are linked simply because when you are not really aware of what your actions are doing towards an individual group of people, you also won't notice microaggressions that are taking place in certain situations and how it presents itself. Microaggressions are also very subtle in different spaces. I have personally experienced a number of cases where I have had to deal with microaggressions, and probably the most recent one was quite ironic because I experienced it 2 or 3 hours before a microaggressions workshop at work. So it doesn't get more ironic than that, but it also just shows that it is very subtle, and when people don't look like you, interact with you in a certain way based on their pre-assumptions about you, it's very hard sometimes to notice it straight away. It takes a bit of time to process that and then think, oh, okay, this wasn't right. So I've broken down how it tends to feed in at a very young age, because these are things that are practiced by groups of people and it's fed into the younger generations, and it starts from a very young age. So a typical example is probably towards Black school children. So things like, you know, when you walk into a shop and straight away a security guard is following you around. At first thought, you might think, okay, they might just be walking around the store, but it gets to a point where it's like, you can see them at the end of every aisle. And that is something that starts from a very young age. So I remember after school going to the chicken and chip shop or the corner shop with my school friends, and, you know, having the same issue take place. And sometimes it would go beyond that, where they would put a limit to how many students can walk in and out of a shop. And that's something that was quite prevalent in areas where there was a large population of Black school children. Also in schools, there are a number of studies which shows that teachers tend to find Black children as more fundamentally disruptive. So no matter what a child is doing, a white student might be seen as expressive, a Black student might be seen as chatty or disruptive, and that filters through in the classroom. School reports, how a teacher decides to discipline a child when they've done something wrong at school. There is a clear difference, and there are a lot of studies showing that. And this leads to things like school uniforms, how they express themselves. And it's also led to reports in terms of exclusion rates. Black students are excluded on a far higher rate than other communities. And as a child grows up and starts expressing themselves, it also feeds into hearing statements like, oh, you know, you speak well for a Black person. And that filters through as they grow up. And as you grow up, you do start to think about the situations that you experienced when you were younger, and you realize, hold on, that wasn't a very normal thing to have happened to me. But when you're younger, it's like some of the younger students some of the younger speakers that we've just had, it doesn't hit you straight away. It takes a bit of time to realize, wait a minute, something's not right. I shouldn't be treated like this. So that's how the two are very interlinked. Now it comes down to dealing with unconscious bias and microaggressions as a Black Muslim. So a common theme that has already popped up is having to prove your faith. Oftentimes where, you know, I'm also from a Somali background, and I grew up in an area where there were a lot of Black and Asian people, and that was the same in schools. However, when I've hung out with some of my Black Muslim friends who are from West African descent, or they have just darker skin than me, I've noticed that I don't get questioned as much as they do. And there's always this concept of, oh, you know, prove they are Muslim, you know, read this ayah from the Quran, or, you know, answer this question. And so that's something that starts at a very young age as well. And it's sort of a result of things that kids might be picking up from environments that they grow up in. There's also the situation of when these conversations are happening, it's very often the case that other demographics within the Muslim community will derail these conversations when talking about faith and being Black in the same realm. So you often hear things like, oh, but Bilal was Black, oh, so-and-so was Black. oh, we don't see color. And it's things like that that derail the conversation of the issue with having biases, conscious or unconscious, and some of the microaggressions that follow as a result. And then there's also the use of derogatory terms that's picked up from a very young age, and that also filters through, and it is a consequence of dealing with unconscious bias and microaggressions. So oftentimes, if kids are growing up in environments where it's normal to have certain views towards Black Muslim people, that filters onto the kids, and that sort of mentality is brought into spaces like schools, like workplaces, like, social activities that young people engage in. And it does lead to the use of derogatory terms, which has been normalized for those children, using them by environments that they're growing up in. And then as you move along, you start noticing that when you're navigating certain spaces, you already get the drift, you already get the indication that, oh, I'm already being perceived differently from the moment I walk into a room. It gets to a point where you've now realized there's a pattern, being a Black Muslim woman or being a Black Muslim in general, that these people around me are perceiving me in a certain way because of their biases or their assumptions about me. So these are some of the many ways that Black Muslims deal with unconscious bias and microaggressions. And so this leads on to the steps to challenge microaggressions and unconscious bias moving forward. So I think the most important part is addressing the issue and addressing it in a space where you're allowed to express what's causing this and how it's making the people on the receiving end feel. And by doing so, you are enabling people with the opportunity to analyze the language that's used towards Black Muslim within this context. So certain phrases, certain assumptions, certain questions that, challenge the faith of a Black Muslim. By being able to address these issues in a safe space, and then being able to, really think about the language that we're using when talking about Black Muslims within this context, it allows us to move forward. So that then leads on to the next point, which is to deal with the issue at the root cause through educating the community. Once the discussions are happening and once the language is being analyzed and being challenged in terms of how it's being used towards Black Muslims in a negative way, we can now focus on what do we do at foundation level to educate those in the community that might not even be aware that the language that they use or the thoughts and assumptions that they have, contribute to microaggressions and unconscious bias. So by being able to break things down at fundamental level, you're allowing people to express themselves, and you're finding more practical ways to move on and educate people about this to make sure that they can learn from this and hopefully not pass on the same stereotypes and negative assumptions moving forward. So that's just a summary of microaggressions and unconscious bias among Black Muslim youth. So yeah, I'm assuming this is the time where we can have the people who want to talk about their experiences as well.
Yes, Jazakallah khair, Amina, for that. That was a beautiful breakdown of the link between unconscious bias and microaggression. And I have to say that a lot of the points that you've raised really resonated with me. In particular, when you spoke about the treatment of Black youths within retail shops and whatnot, and I find that even as an adult, sometimes you are faced with these situations, and it's about understanding how you can address that. And thank you so much for sharing some steps with us that we can all take away. Can I just invite Azizat now to share with us her experience and her views on the topic that we have, which is unconscious bias and microaggressions among young numbers.
Sorry.
Okay, welcome Azizat.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
My name is Azizat, as it has been said, and I think the first thing I just want to point out that I noticed was that quite a few of the things as we've gone through this program that was said, I felt like I was just turning, because my sister's here as well, and I was just turning to her, I was like, oh my God, I was going to say that type of thing. And so I just noticed that it seems like we do all seem to have been going through very, very similar experiences, especially the one about being told you speak well for a Black person. And on that note, I think one thing, like my point of view from here is slightly different, I think, in terms of what was said just in the presentation now, for example, about Black people being seen as more disruptive, for example, because personally, my personality is such that I'm generally quite quiet and kind of reserved to some extent. And so generally when I'm outside or like around lots of people, I don't tend to speak a lot. And I've noticed that for me, as opposed to people seeing me being Black and thinking, oh, she's going to be loud or whatever, it's more of a thing of people seeing me as a Muslim girl who is very quiet, and with the sort of bias of like Black people being loud and disruptive and etc. With the fact that I'm Muslim, I'm Black, and I'm quiet, I have noticed quite a few times people, not even, this isn't so much about white people or like non-Black people judging you or judging me, as it is about like people in my own community. So things like other non-Muslim Black people or even Muslim Black people. And as opposed to almost having to prove my faith, I feel like because my personality, as I said, is quite reserved, it becomes a thing of having to not prove that I'm Black, because obviously everyone can see that I'm Black, but sort of like people telling me, oh, you act really white, why are you so quiet, like why are you not more sort of, you know, like why are you not acting Black essentially? So like, although I definitely feel like there is the problem of people thinking as a Black person, as a Black female girl who is Muslim, you are expected to be sort of seen as like really like outgoing. But on the flip side, you have some people like myself who are not like that, very obviously not like that, and it becomes a thing of within people who are sort of like me and who I should be able to relate to, who are telling me that like, why are you not acting as you should be like acting as a Black person? So things like so for example, if like I'm with maybe a couple of my Black friends, for example, and they're speaking about, I don't know, like grime music or like something of that sort, because there was like in the past especially, I never like I wasn't interested in like rap music, etc. It's not even like putting aside the Islamic point of views on music and such, I just wasn't interested in it. And I noticed that there were a lot of points where people would be like, where my own friends who are like me would literally be like, why do you not listen to such and such music? Like, are you not even Black? Like, what are you doing? And I feel like, although like we shouldn't be like, I just feel like I shouldn't have to act a certain way to be seen as like Black, nor should I have to act a certain way to be seen as being Muslim. So I think pretty much the point I'm trying to make here is that I feel like there's two sides of this coin. So on one hand, you have the problem of being seen as not being Muslim enough because you're Black. And then you have on the other hand, like being seen as like not Black enough. I don't think it's so much because like because I'm Muslim that I'm not seen as Black enough, or maybe it's just my personality. And I think one of the speakers before, I can't remember who it was, I think it was Latifa, mentioned the fact that she is also quiet, and that she was told that she isn't sort of like other Somali girls, sorry. And so quite similar to that, the idea of sort of being seen like you have to like be a certain way, because obviously I'm Black and I'm Muslim and I'm reserved. Why can it not sort of be all those things together? And I guess to be on like a more positive note, because I think, as it was mentioned before, I do spoken word and poetry, and I think I'm quite lucky in that sense, because for me, that has been a sort of way for me whereby I've maybe performed and sort of spoken my mind about different issues such as anti-Blackness, or like being judged because you're Muslim, or being like, because obviously as a Black female young Muslim girl, it almost seems as if I've got like just everything's just bad. But essentially the fact that I've been able to have the opportunity to sort of speak about my experiences, as well as maybe try to sort of help other people understand, not only like people who aren't like me, but also maybe other people who are like me and maybe have gone through similar experiences. I feel like I have been quite lucky in that I've been able to sort of be involved in that. And apart from like spoken words, for example, in secondary school, I also did debating, and I just remembered this as things were being spoken about just now. But I remember because on the debate team, there were 2 Black Muslim girls, myself, as well as another, I think she was Somali, and like Black Muslim girl. And on one hand, you have me, who, as I said, quiet, reserved, doesn't really speak that much. And on the other hand, you have her, who maybe some people might see it as more like the sort of classic, loud Black girl type thing. And so it came to a point where it was essentially as if they needed, if someone was needed to speak, it was as if almost once you have one Black Muslim girl, you don't need another one. And of course, if you have someone who is loud and is able to sort of get their point across very sort of clearly and is able to interact with people and is sort of more of a big personality, if that makes sense, compared to me, who is more quiet, although it's not like I don't know how to speak, or like I'm shy or whatever, but it's just because that's just how I am, like my personality. So it becomes a point of almost competing for that role of the Black Muslim girl who is representing the school in debating, if that makes sense. And so essentially, just to sort of come to an end, because I feel like I've been talking for a while, but I think apart from the problem of sort of people thinking, oh, you're Black, so you must be like loud, so how can you be Muslim? I think there's also a sort of internal problem within our own community, whereby it seems as if like, oh, you're hanging out with white people, why are you like being so not Black? So I think things like that also that like that issue is something that we as a community of Black people, whether you're Muslim or not, need to sort of reflect on and realize that if we ourselves are sort of playing into these stereotypes of, oh, you're Black, so you must listen to rap music, and so you must be loud. Like if we ourselves are holding on to those stereotypes, how can we expect that other people will not? Like that, like if you're sort of playing onto that sort of expectation, then you can't really get upset or surprised or like say that someone's being a racist when they express that same like idea. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and Salam alaikum. Oops, it's going to drop again.
Beautifully summarized at the end, and I completely agree with everything you've said, but especially the final point that you raised, which is about the much needed work that's needed within our own communities to dismantle some of the stereotypes that we have about the type of behavior we expect of people of certain ethnicity. And completely agree with the ideas that you mentioned about the stereotypes around being Black and being associated with being loud and having that conflict between your identity as a Muslim and your identity as a Black person, and how sometimes the two are not seen as coherent. So yeah, thank you so much, Azizat, and for sharing with us. And this, I think the topics and the experiences that were shared with us are very important in addressing the issues that we have within our community. And our next topic, which I'm really excited about, is representation of young Black Muslims within Muslim spaces. But before we move on to that, I'm going to quickly touch upon Abdul Karim, who's our 16-year-old, who's been waiting to speak to us about his experience with microaggression and unconscious bias.
Salam alaikum. Thank you for bringing me here today. And I realized during Amina's presentation of unconscious biasness, I really it touched me because a lot of the things she said has related to me, a lot, security guard walking, following me around the whole shop. And obviously it comes to my mind, why is it me that he follows me? Is there not a lot of other people to check for? And also I remember probably one of the worst things that's happened to me was on the way to a football match. I was in a tracksuit and around 3 police officers, community officers, they just stopped me off my bike, and it was not nice. It was pretty aggressive, I could say. And they just stopped me. They searched my bag without any doubt. They just said, yeah, you just match a profile of a drug dealer around the area. And they let me go. And obviously it comes to my mind, why is it me? It got me my heart pumping. I always thought what if something turned out wrong? Alhamdulillah, I can say that if this was in America, it could be a worse situation for me, with me losing my life. And that's sadly not the first occasion that's happened. It's happened while I was walking to town. An unmarked police car stopped me while I was walking across the road. And it was a group of me and my friends. We all got stopped, we got searched. They said a lot of drug deals are happening around the area, and how we matched the description of the men. They didn't say how tall, they just searched us and left, which is a bit sad. Yeah. And I'll probably say even during primary school, getting I'll always get the question daily, which is sad. Are you really Muslim? Because I'm Black. I even introduced it one time, long time ago in primary school, but throughout the years, they always used to ask me girls, Muslim girls and boys, they'll just keep on asking me are you Muslim? Are you sure you're Muslim? And I always thought why can't they take my word for it? And even in mosques, sadly, Muslim brothers are Asian. Once I walk in recently, they just give me a look, which is a bit sad. I don't feel like I belong here. That's what they give it as. Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Abdurrahman, for sharing. Abdul Karim for sharing with that with us. And I have to say, a lot of Black Muslim males probably identify with the experience that you've just shared about the racial profiling by the police, which is a key issue that the Black Muslim community suffers from, and it's something that we need to work collaboratively with the police on to ensure that it stops happening. So thank you so much for sharing that experience with us, and in general about how you dealt with microaggressions. And now we'll go on to our next speaker, which I'm very pleased to invite. That's Mamadou Tal, who will go through the topic of representation of young Black Muslims within Muslim spaces. Mamadou is a young British Muslim who studied Islam and Arabic at the Al-Azhar Mosque, mashallah. He's also a prominent voice on social media and represents young British Muslims in a fresh and contemporary way. He also hosts the Malcolm Effect podcast. Jazakallah khair, Mamadou, for joining us today. We're all looking forward to hear about your session. Mamadou will be joined by our youngest panelist today, which is Gibran Adam Jimadou, and also we will be rejoined by Barakat Azizat, who we've heard from in the first presentation. Mamadou, the floor is all yours.
Thank you for MCB for having me, and thank you for all our amazing kind of contributors. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulih al-Mustafa wa ala ibadihi alladhina irtada wa man bi hudahum ihtada wa bi athari ahli al-Madinati iktafa. Amma abad, this is going out everywhere. Let me look presentable for these people. Okay. There was no contribution. There was no Black contribution to Islam. And what I mean by that, every Black History Month, we have very well-meaning, well-intended people go around and say, we're going to speak about the Black contribution to Islam. And I've always found that phrase deeply problematic, because I'm someone who believes that language matters. I'm someone who believes that the vernacular that you choose to express yourself in is very important. Because let's say we were building a cake and this cake was Islam. When we say the Black contribution to Islam, we treat Black believers as if they are on the periphery. If we were building this cake called Al-Islam, we treat Black believers as if they were only provided the flour. And I find that deeply problematic, because when we look at our history, we see, starting from our father, Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam, was a Black man, the first prophet. We see that the most mentioned prophet in the Quran, so much so that you cannot find one juz out of the 30 ajza in the Quran, except that Sayyidina Musa is mentioned. And he was a Black man. When the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam went on Isra and Miraj and says, "Ra'aytu Musa, ra'aytu rajulan adam ash-shadid," I saw a man who was a very dark-skinned person, and he said that was Musa. When we look in the Quran, we find a whole surah dedicated to the story of Luqman al-Hakim. We find that he was a Black man from Habasha, and the scholars differ on whether he was a prophet or whether he was a friend of Allah. When we look into our own tradition, we find that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam calls his second mother who was a Black woman. When we look past the Prophet into the Salaf, may Allah be pleased with them all, we find that the first scholar, or one of the first scholars to give a fatwa against domestic violence, one of the first scholars to declare domestic violence and violence against women haram was Ata ibn Abi Rabah, was a Black man. When Abu Hanifa, who is the founder of the largest schools, the largest schools in Sunni Islam, when he performed Hajj, he made 5 mistakes, and he was corrected by a barber, someone cutting hair. And Abu Hanifa says, "Where did you learn all this fiqh from?" He says, Ata ibn Abi Rabah, who was a Black scholar from the Salaf. When we go past Ata ibn Abi Rabah, past the Salaf, we find that one of the first fatwas, legal edicts that declares slavery and the selling of Black slaves to be haram, was Ahmad Baba Timbuktu from Mali. When we find that we look into Uthman Dan Fodio, Sheikh Abdullah Inyas, Sheikh Ibrahim Inyas, Umar Futi Tal, Ahmad Bamba, all these scholars who fought against the colonial French, either non-violently or took up arms and waged jihad against these imperialists and colonialists. They were all Black scholars. So my issue with the term contribution is quite false. The term contribution to Islam, or the Black contribution to Islam, is false, because the existence of Islam is contingent on the existence of Black believers. There is no Islam without Black believers. And in thinking about this topic of my talk, which I was given yesterday, topic of this talk, where it says the representation of young Black Muslims in Muslim spaces. Again, well-meaning were intended, but Black Muslims in Muslim spaces should already be a given. It is unacceptable that in cosmopolitan cities that Black Muslims are not involved in the discussion. And I've said previously, which people have quoted me on, that it is unacceptable and no longer going to be tolerated that the committee of the mosque or the institute must reflect and look like the people that it serves. So, for example, what things can we do? What kind of thing? I tell young Black Muslims, challenge your madrasa, challenge your institutions, challenge the mosques. What does the board look like? Representation matters, because we find how many times we see recently, or the Pure Gym fiasco, which was talking about making light of slavery. Or we see, for example, the H&M advert who advertises a young Black kid as a monkey. because these things happen many of the times because Black people are not on the board. Also as well, we must challenge the responses that masajid have to the cultural expressions of Black people. It's no longer acceptable that the cultural expressions of Arabs are just deemed as, okay, clearly it's Islamic. Or the cultural expressions of Asians, of Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, these great cultural traditions are just seen as automatically Islamic. Also as well, we must routinely challenge the language that is said. For example, I've seen it time and time again, when a Black person becomes Muslim, the language that is used is, oh, this Black person has been elevated by Islam, which is true. But because of the white supremacist kind of takes that many Muslims have internalized, when a white person becomes Muslim, what is said, it's almost as if Islam is now more true because the white person has become Muslim, whereas the opposite for a Black person. These things must be challenged. My big brother Ismael mentioned in his talk, the Birmingham Imam, I think it was a year or two ago, which I called out. He said 2 instances. When he was commenting on the rise in crime in Ramadan, he says, brothers, we are not Black. This is a Pakistani Imam who says this, as if to say Black people are the only people who can commit crime. He also says in a talk that brothers, we need to stop acting as if we're Jamaican when speaking about bad behavior. Again, I might be wrong, I may be wrong, but I didn't see MCB call out that. I'll put a statement out condemning that man, on condemning that masjid for allowing that to happen. And these are the things, and until we have a real conversation and you know, being really practical in our approach, I think the time for talk is done now. And this is where many Black people are frustrated, and I definitely count myself in that. We must start to, it's very cliche, but you know, we have to walk the walk. What are our institutions doing to contribute to Black scholarship? You know, put your money where your mouth is, kind of thing. But yeah, I'm sure you're sick of me already. So that's just my kind of overview of representation and why I think it matters. Alhamdulillah, I'm looking forward to hear the rest of them.
Jazakallah khair, Mamadou, for that. Mashallah, you've raised a lot of interesting points, and I'm sure you can see on the chat, it resonated with everybody who's here with us today, listening to your talk. Jazakallah khair, thank you so much for that. I'll come back to what is the question that you've raised, which is what the MCB is doing. And the MCB, as many other Muslim organizations, they are trying to change the narrative by creating spaces like this, where we can discuss and raise issues that we have with the way things have been dealt with historically. So through this conference, we hope that we are starting the conversations and engaging with the Black Muslim community to understand, as an organization, where work needs to be done, and being proactive within the community to call out actions like that Imam who has used stereotype of the Black image to discredit Black Muslims. Now I'd like to welcome Gibran, who's our youngest panelist. He's a 10-year-old and he's studying very hard for his 11+ exams next week. Inshallah, we wish you all the best for that. He's the oldest of 3 children and is of Ghanaian heritage, and his granddad was the head of the cocoa board in Ghana, mashallah. Welcome, Barakat. Gibran.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Gibran. I'm from Ghana. So I was born in London. I went to a school, and that school was very diverse. There was a lot of Black people, Asian people, it was a very diverse school. But I had to move somewhere else because my dad got a new job in a new place. So when I moved here, for about the first month or 2, I didn't feel very wanted. My teacher was very strict on me, and I just didn't like the school that much. Yeah. So I missed all my friends in my old school, and this school was really hard to fit in. It was hard to make friends, but I did make friends eventually. Some of some of them were black, some of them were blacks and some weren't. But I had to try and fit in as much as I could in the new environment.
And when you say you tried to fit in, Gibran, do you want to tell us a little bit more about why you felt that way?
When I say that, I mean, because at my old school, I was really popular and I was really popular and I loved my old school. I had lots of friends, very diverse, but this school, no one was really welcoming. No one was really that welcoming to me. Nobody really spoke to me on the playgrounds or wanted to partner up with me if you were doing a partner up activity in class. Everybody just wanted to be with their friends and no one really welcomed me in.
That's really a shame. And how do you think this experience has impacted you in the way that you see your surroundings in this new area and how you feel about where you live?
Well, where I live now, because I moved to the school I'm in now in year 1, over the years I've gained more friends. Some friends have left, some friends have joined recently, but now I feel really confident. Let's say I feel more welcome now. That because I've been in the school longer, I know a lot about the school. I know lots of the teachers, the students, and now I just feel more welcome.
And do you think it's taken you a long time to get to that level of comfort, to feel welcome?
I think it has taken a very long time because even when I did have friends, I kept telling myself, do they really want me as friends? Do they really want me as friends? Do they really care about me? Would they choose him over me or something and stuff like that?
Why do you think were you thinking like that? Like, was it their behavior? Did they say something to you?
Well, they haven't said anything yet. At that time, they hadn't said anything, but I think it was their behavior that really made me get those thoughts. Some friends would, when we were in the middle of playing a game, they would just leave me and go and play with other friends. And I think that really hurt for me. Like, I don't know if that would hurt that much for anyone else, but that really hurt for me a lot.
No, it's a difficult position to be in as a child, and I'm really sorry that you had to go through that. And I really want to thank you for coming on. I know it's very difficult for you, just only 10 years old, mashallah, to share this with us.
Yeah, sometimes when I was older and I knew about when I started thinking that it was a bit like racism and some people really being rude to me, really rude about and I really thought that it was just because I was black and just because I was different from everyone else. I don't really have that many black people in my school, so I really felt just alone. Yeah.
No, and that's an experience that I think a lot of other kids who are in a similar situation to you, who are the only ones in their school, probably share. What are your takeaways from this experience? Like, would you do anything? What would you like if you were to give advice to your younger self? What would you tell yourself?
Well, if I was to give advice to anyone else, I would say to not let anyone down. Even if people are being rude to you, don't give up yet. You should always keep trying to not keep trying to fit in, but don't worry about people that are being rude to you or saying mean things to you or not including you. You should just feel loved. You love yourself, even if people are being rude to you, just love yourself.
Jazakallah khair. That's a beautiful note to end on, Gibran. Yes, I agree. Self-love is the most important thing. And if you think the world of yourself, people will start to see what a gem you are. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Barakat, thank you for joining us again.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for letting me come back on here and talk. I just wanted to talk about my experience in the masjid. So from a young age, I started going mosque, obviously, to learn more about Islam. And learn how to read the Quran. And whilst I was doing this, unfortunately, I got called the N-word twice. The first time, it was like full on the N-word. But then the second time, because my name is Baraka. The second time, I'm so sorry.
That's okay, take your time. While we wait for Baraka to come back, I'd like to just encourage everyone to continue engaging with us through the chat and the Q&A function. I've seen amazing support and comments being provided to our panelists, and I hope they're all are looking through the chat. We really appreciate all your contributions, and we hope that these truthful stories that have been shared by our young contributors perhaps resonate with some and give some food for thought, so that we can all try to make a change and impact as much as we can within our communities to make their lives easier. Because just hearing a 10-year-old like Gibran sharing his story about his school and the difficulties he's gone through, I'm sure is breaking the hearts of everyone, and it's the same with all of our young contributors today. And I think I just want to reiterate the point that Mamadou gave, which is about the engagement of Black Muslims within the Muslim spaces, and that it should be a given. So we all need to think about our communities and the spaces that we have within our communities and the influence that we have and what we can do to make a small change perhaps that will aid making the lives of those future generations easier. I'll now like to open for Q&A. Just quickly to our three fantastic presentations that we had and the young contributors. I've got a question here, which I will direct at Brother Ismael, if he's still with us here. Brother Ismael, what role is, what are your views around police engaging with Black Muslims, and how can relationships be improved?
That's a very good question. Personally, if the engagement is positive and from a genuine place, I believe there's many Afro-Caribbean mosques, contrary to ignorant people's beliefs, in the UK. So there's the North Brixton Mosque in the Oval, that's near the Oval. We've got the Brixton Mosque that's opposite the Brixton Police Station. We have the Old Kent Road Mosque in Peckham, and we have the mosque in Lascelles, in Birmingham, Soho Street, and we also have the Salam Community Mosque in Moss Side. From what I've seen, the police engagement has been positive. What we need, I believe, we need a mixture of not only the Muslim Police Association, we need the Black Police Association also to engage, because what it is, part of the Black Police Association's outreach, that they do youth empowerment programs. So we need the Black Police Association to outreach to the Black Muslim organizations, because they sometimes send the Muslim associations, and with respect, most of the Muslim police associations are useless in their engagement with Black Muslim organizations. So I believe that Black Muslim organizations need to engage not only with the Muslim police associations, but with the Black police associations too. But there's room for improvement.
Agreed, agreed. Thank you so much for that. Brother Mamadou, I don't know if you want to add anything from your point of view as to how engagement with the police can be improved.
Yes, Mami. Sorry,
what are your views around police engaging with Black Muslims, and how can relationships be improved?
If I'm honest, I feel like we say Black Muslims, but I feel like it's a tough one, because maybe obviously for women who wear the hijab is different, but for the majority of people who come in contact with the law enforcement who are men, it is not our Muslimness that is taken to task when we have an issue with the police officers. It's our Blackness that's taken to task. So the broader question should just be, how can Muslims help Black people who come into contact with the law enforcement, basically. And obviously out there's many things that can be done, knowing your rights for stop and search and so forth and so on and so forth. Also, I'm a massive fan of Hawa, Shea, who's on here, and she's a barrister, and I hope that maybe me and her can work together and hopefully produce some things that can be beneficial to Black people, black men, and how they can kind of interact with law enforcement in a positive way, which hasn't been the case so far.
Agreed. Jazakallah khair for that. I will now move on to our fourth presentation of the day, and which we'll discuss Black Muslim sisters and misogynoir. And we have the fantastic Hafsa Dabiri with us today to discuss this topic. Hafsa has a background in politics and international relations and in the media space as a presenter. She's also an editor-in-chief of Muslim Inspires, and she's a founder of the Dabiri Group and also an advocate and an insights strategist. Welcome, Hafsa.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I've been sat here for a while. I've cried, I've smiled, I've laughed. Honestly, it's been sort of really amazing to sort of hear everybody's experiences that are all very different, but I think also there are so many similarities that sort of bring everyone together and just sort of unites us, alhamdulillah. I think especially when I was listening to, I think his name's Gibran, I was literally in tears because that's the kind of person I am. A lot of the things that I do literally come from experiences that I had when I was younger, and feeling as if the children who are now growing up shouldn't have to feel like that, and they shouldn't have to go through that, and they shouldn't be as lost or as sort of the journey towards finding their identity being as difficult as it was for us growing up, inshallah. So I'll tell you a bit about what I do. Hopefully at the end of this really short presentation, I'm going to try and keep it as short as possible. But just to begin with, I just want to sort of take you through a journey. I'm a storyteller, I write stories. So I'm just going to tell you a bit of my story, inshallah, and then I'll tell you a bit about what I do and why I think it's important in creating spaces, not only for Black Muslim women, but I think spaces for Black Muslim women just tend to naturally accommodate Black Muslim men, Black Muslims, and just Black people in general, and even non-Muslims and non-Black people. So yeah, so my journey sort of obviously started when I was in primary school, going into secondary school, much like Gibran, and I came from a background where my parents felt it was very important for me to get my Islamic education. So in primary school, for the first couple of years, I went to an Islamic primary school, and it was a different experience. I think, yeah, it was. I definitely am very thankful for having that foundation. But when you're in a space that is majority Asian and Arab, it's quite difficult to understand where your Blackness fits in with Islam. My parents had to come in to the school to sort of like defend my ability to read the Quran, because they kind of would just leave me sitting at the back, just assuming that I don't know anything. And alhamdulillah for parents who sort of recognized how the system could potentially work against their children and sort of, you know, take steps to ensuring that they did their best to sort of counter that. And so that was my first experience of sort of understanding that not everybody wants the best for me, and not everybody is there to sort of see me prosper. A lot of the things that I saw growing up, I was just thinking, oh, it can't possibly be that they're horrible people. Maybe sometimes it's me. Maybe I just need to sit back and just not read Quran, and maybe I don't know how to read Quran and things like that. And so, yeah, I think that was the first experience where I saw my mum literally going, you need to move her up classes. And it was like, okay, fine. I've got the ability the same as the other kids, and I shouldn't question myself. And so after that experience in Islamic school, I went to a school in Southeast London, majority Black Christian. I saw everything. I, you know, came from a school where they wouldn't even say swear words. Like we didn't even say silly or stupid, to language just that I'd never heard of. And I'd be like, yeah, what does that mean? And I think my Blackness at that point, it was like, how do I reconcile that with the Muslimness that I've sort of grown up with? And, you know, do I have to be that way? And I think one of the sisters mentioned it before, that she was like, oh, she's not that into rap, she's not into that sort of music, but you know, can she still be Black without sort of going and, you know, exploring that side of Black culture. And for me, it was really new to me. I just didn't understand what it was. And I think the way that I'd grown up, I just thought this is super haram. Like, I don't know why these people are doing this, but it's super haram. And that was sort of how I saw Blackness as I was in primary school. And then I went into secondary school, and alhamdulillah, again, for parents that sort of push you to explore, but I was so lost. I was literally like, I don't want to be the same person I was in primary school. Like, I know that's not me. I know when I'm at home, I'm cheeky, I'm loud, and I don't question people putting me in, like, I'm not placed into a box. I can be loud without being the angry Black woman. I can be cheeky without being, you know, a cheeky monkey. Like, I can literally just have a character that's not attributed to stereotypes and sort of like painted really negatively, basically. So I got into secondary school and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to explore everything the same way that everybody else is joining all the clubs. I'm not going to limit myself. I'm going to join all the clubs. And so I joined all of the clubs. I joined Debate Society, and I joined the netball and the basketball club. And those were the ones that really surprised me, because I got into the clubs and I was playing on the court, and everyone would just turn around and suddenly there's this hijabi flying across the court, and it was me. I had a great jump back then, and so I played goal defense. If anyone plays netball here, they know it's an elite game. No one should knock netball, but yeah, it was I think sports is a really good way for people to explore sort of, because when you're on the court, nobody cares about like your skin color. They don't care about your background. They kind of just see your skill and they have to respect you for those reasons. And so it was just a really interesting space for me to find friends and to really explore who I wanted to be. And at that point, I thought, yeah, I found my purpose. I'm settled. I told my mum, yep, gonna play netball professionally, and I'm gonna like become a netball coach. And, you know, once I can't play no more and that kind of thing. And she was really supportive, alhamdulillah. Obviously, that's not the case now. I'm definitely not doing that right now, but that's what I wanted at that point. And then a couple of years down the line, I remember the last match that I ever played, it was in the rain, and I was walking back to the car, and suddenly I was just feeling like pain all over my body. And I was thinking, what is this? What is this pain right now? And I was in hospital, in and out of hospital, different tests, different x-rays. And I found out at that point that I had a disability. So I was now a Black Muslim woman in the UK, in the West, with a disability. And it's a disability that's visible at some points and not visible at other times. And it was a really difficult period for me. I was physically abused on the street at some point while I was like sort of on crutches. And you sort of go through these instances of Islamophobia and racism, and you don't even know where it's coming from. It's like, is it because I've got a disability? Is it because I'm Black? Is it because I'm Muslim? Like, where is this violence coming from? And at such a young age, again, I feel like when you don't have a strong understanding of who you are, or you don't have a strong community or home that reminds you sort of who you can be, and how you can explore who you want to be, it's very difficult growing up and dealing with all of that trauma, all of those microaggressions, all of that structural violence, all of that verbal and physical violence. It's not easy, subhanAllah. And although I look back on it now and I'm like, alhamdulillah for those experiences, because they've really shaped what I do now. Back then it was very difficult, and it's not something that I think anybody should have to go through. We want to build societies where people do not have to go through that, where everywhere is accessible, regardless of your race, your ability, your gender, your religion. And that lends its way onto sort of the work that I do now. And so in that process of recovery for me, writing was an outlet that was just very cathartic, I think, in being able to think about my experiences in a way that other people could understand. And so my first children's book, called Basira the Basketballer, was published with a Black Muslim girl who plays basketball. Netball wasn't something that, you know, I feel like people would read, even though it's a great sport. So I had to make it basketball instead. And basketball is a great sport. I played that as well. But it's loosely based off of sort of my experiences in not only sort of developing confidence in my identity, but how faith and belief in Allah is such a important part of that process. Learning about how your culture and faith intersects and how you can balance those things is truly the best foundation that you can have going into a world where we're going to be faced with trauma and we're going to be faced with microaggressions. And so the book is something that I, created with the mindset of, I feel as if there needs to be more representation. I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago about diversifying our dreams, and that comes from the idea that when we read books when we're young, you literally escape into a different place and you imagine yourself as different people, as having different sort of abilities and just different possibilities and hopes for yourself. And so for me, it was important that I wrote a book and books that sort of transform the way in which Black Muslim girls, Black people, women can see themselves. And I think especially with the society that we're moving towards, it's especially important that we show that faith, culture, talent, sport, that kind of thing, that it all kind of intersects and it fuses very beautifully, because everything is sort of pitted as a binary, that you can't be Black and Muslim, that you can't be someone who's faithful but also sort of seek the things in this life as well. And so that's inshallah what we're hoping to do with that, and we're actually fundraising right now to transform this book into a movie, and we're in a competition that we could raise £3,000 if by the end of the day we get a certain amount of supporters. So if you want to know more information, let me know and I'll probably drop the link into the chat. But that's currently what we're working on. And also there's a talk show called the Discovery Talk Show that I started about 2 years ago, and that was literally about creating safe spaces for Black Muslims to have discussions and to talk about things like relationships, like mental health, like media and politics, and just have a space where they're not on the defense. And for me, I didn't realize what the impact of that work is and what the impact of any of my work was until I sort of hear from people, alhamdulillah. And I remember one sister, she came to me and she was like, I walked in and I felt like crying, because it was like, she never felt a space where she didn't have to like question herself, and she didn't have to question other people's motives, and she'd never walked into a space and felt so wholly sort of accepted for who she was. And those are the kind of spaces that we want to keep on creating, because it's within those spaces that our religion can thrive and people's spirituality and their faith can really grow. And so that's one of the talk shows that we run on an annual basis. It's meant to be in January, but Corona's not going to let us do it at this point. But yeah, those are kind of the works that we're doing at the moment. And just to round off, I think any talent that anybody has, we have to ensure that it's always moving towards creating more inclusive societies. Like whatever you're doing, however you're doing it, making sure that one element of it considers, okay, how can I make this more inclusive? Whether it's that you're mentoring people, or you're just ensuring that the structure that you're working within, you're making it more inclusive, you're making that salah space available. All of those things are really important. And I'm just one last thing, super inspired by most of the people, not even most of the people, all of the people on this panel, especially Amina. I've been seeing the work that she's been doing with women, with programming and computer science, and literally every element of that is literally to make the industry more inclusive. And that's what we need to be doing, inshallah, just our bit. You don't have to change the world, just literally changing the space in your community, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Hafsa, for that amazing speech. Clearly speechless. Following on, please follow and support Basira, Hafsa's book. Basira, the footballer, says inshallah, and we hope to see it materialize into a movie. As we've had very inspirational talks, unfortunately we've sort of ran over our schedule, so we'll be slightly finishing later, but swiftly let's move on to the final presentation of part one, which is about young Black Muslim excellence, and this is by Brother Rakeen Fatuga, who's a scholar and the founder of Save Our Boys organization. Brother Rakeen has not been able to join us today, so he's prepared a video which we'll play shortly. Apologies, we're having issues with the sound. Which we're trying to rectify at the moment.
Assalamu alaikum. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق وقاتل ما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حقا قدر المقدار العظيم يا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر أمري ولا أثم من لساني يفقهوا قولي ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم أما بعد. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Alhamdulillah that I'm given this opportunity by MCB to have a chance to talk about this interesting subject, interesting topic. Young Black Muslim excellence. I'd just like to start off with a few quotes. Success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he has overcome while trying to succeed. Booker T. Washington. Never be limited by other people's limited imaginations. Dr. Mae Jemison, first African-American female astronaut. The time is always right to do what is right. Martin Luther King. So this talk is entitled Young Black Muslims. I'm going to analyze what it is, where it came from. I'm going to try and explain that this excellence did not come out of a vacuum, but it's something that has developed over years. So, young Black excellence. Young Black Muslim excellence is the brilliant, amazing Muslim Black individuals that we see in society today who are doing great things in all spheres of life, some in social media, some in education, some in professional jobs like law, medicine, all of these different areas. They are all to do with the young Black Muslim excellence. And my argument today is that this kind of individual has come out of a development, knowledge that has been put into the Black community over many, many years. This knowledge, it didn't just appear. There have been many different scholars who have been talking, discussing, writing about all of the great things that Black Muslims have done, and this has created a new type of enlightenment. And just to go over a few, alhamdulillah, Mecca to Medina, which was the first Islamic hip hop rap group, which came around the 90s, was something that was really interesting because not only were they talking about social issues, they touched on things like racism, they touched on things as tribalism, and also they also celebrated. So they had a famous song, which is Descendants of Bilal. And in that song, they were actually talking about all of the great Black and African individuals who've done great things inside Islam. Another very important individual that we need to talk about is Sheikh Abdul Hakim Quick. So Sheikh Abdul Hakim Quick, he wrote his book Deeper Roots, which explained about the history of Islam in the Caribbean. That Islam has been there for a long time, even during slavery times. You could see that some of the Africans that were taken into slavery were already Muslims. And that is very clear. He also spoke about Sheikh Usman Dan Fodio, that he did his doctorate on him, and he enlightened the Muslim world with knowledge about this great individual. Sheikh Malcolm Amissa, who's a lecturer at Cambridge University, has given so many lectures on the excellence of Black Muslim scholars from just after Prophet Muhammad Salam. He also enlightened the world with so many West African scholars of Islam. Sheikh Babika al-Sudani, who's been talked about the greatness of Islam in West Africa and the great men and women who made it so. He also explained about the sheikhs and scholars from Sudan, especially because he's from Sudan, and the spiritual knowledge that they acquired and what they pass on to others. We had some books later on. An important book was by Habiba Kande with his book Illuminating the Darkness, which is a great book, which spoke about many of the African contributions to Islam, right? And also not forgetting Sheikh Dan Juma on his multiple lectures on African history. So this is what I know coming from the Western Hemisphere, coming from the UK. But of course, there would be others in America as well who are enlightening us. Probably the most important of them would be Al-Hajj Malik Al-Shabazz and his book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X. I always encourage every Muslim to read this book. It's a great book, and it actually explains clearly why Malcolm X was the way he was. And it's interesting because a lot of the things that he was talking about, a lot of the knowledge that he was trying to explain to us, we can still see all the issues are here now, right? So we can see that his struggle, what he gave his life for, we're still also involved in that struggle for equality, that struggle to be treated all the same. But
MashaAllah, that was a very powerful video by Brother Akeem. Thank you for that. And now we have an opportunity to ask questions to our panelists. So we've got Hafsa, Mamadou and Ismael. So if anyone has any questions, please pop it in the Q&A box and I will try to get to them as soon as I can. But in the meantime, we will wrap up this section of the conference with a spoken word performance by Azizat Hassan. We'll just play the video now, if you give us a second to share. Apologies, we seem to be having technical difficulties with the video that we wanted to play for all of you guys. What we'll do is, inshallah, we'll try to come back to it, as well as any other questions that anyone has for our panelists. I can see we've got a question here. How should Black women deal with misogyny within Black Muslim spaces? If I can call on Sister Hafsa to answer that question quickly. Sister Hafsa. So I'll read the question again. The question is, how should Black women deal with misogyny within Black Muslim spaces?
So I think as with any form of discrimination, it's sort of not on the party that experiences it to have to sort of find the solution, inshallah. So I think it's more about structures, as Mamadou described, sort of making sure that there is representation on boards of women and Black people that accurately represents sort of the community that attends the masajid. But I think in terms of communication on a one-to-one basis, it very much depends on what that individual is capable of doing. I would say that if you have it within you to educate is incumbent upon us as Muslims anyway. So if you have it within you, then it's definitely sort of part of the sunnah to take that road and to educate people and, you know, sort of speak about from an Islamic perspective how that's not acceptable, or to just speak up about your experiences and have that sort of voiced as a complaint within the masjid. But obviously, if you're not comfortable with that and it affects your mental health, that is something that we also really need to consider heavily, because I think within a lot of these conversations as to what people should do, there's a very heavy burden that's placed on the people who are going through the trauma. So if that does apply to you, inshallah, I would say step away from those spaces, especially if it's a place of worship. You shouldn't have to deal with that trauma and those microaggressions that sort of trigger any feelings or any negative emotions within such a spiritual environment. So I would say seek other environments, seek other communities that allow you to sort of sit within them more comfortably and allow you to connect with Allah in a way that's beneficial, inshallah. I hope that answers the question.
Yes. No.
Can I just add to that, if that's possible?
Yes, please do.
I think it's very important, even before we talk about misogyny in masjids, we must speak about and address misogyny that exists in the tradition. So we find in the Islamic tradition, which many people are always shocked when I say this, but again, it's taught in our fiqh book. So any people who attend maybe like a seminary or Dar al-Ulum will come across these books, black or white or whatever you may be. So for example, in the tradition we have, it says very clearly that black women do not have to wear hijab because they're ugly. It says very clearly that black women don't require a wali to get married because they're not desirable in society in the first place. You have many fatwa and many religious edicts that say that it's impermissible for women to cut their hair, which ignores the cultural context for black women. Many black women go through their youth, relaxing their hair, which damages their hair, and then they want to end up going natural now, so they want to cut their hair off, and then they're told by these false hadith that cutting their hair is haram, and then cutting their hair because on Yawm al-Qiyamah they will be punished and all this stuff. So I feel like before we even now, obviously, again, I always feel like we can do more things than more than one thing at once, but we must challenge the misogyny that exists in the tradition. And I think it's very important because the tradition is what then breeds these scholars to have anti-black views. Because think about it, if you're going to Dar al-Ulum in the UK and you're hearing that, oh, black women are ugly, they don't need to wear hijab, and you're hearing that and you take it as well, we don't have a culture of challenging at the moment, unfortunately. We have a culture of sami'na wa ata'na, listen and obey. And even if someone ends up challenging it, what are we told? Do not be like Bani Israel, because they were condemned for challenging too much. So, and then what happens? This person goes through that. And unfortunately, anti-blackness is rife within our tradition. So think about it, someone who's a student of knowledge in the UK goes through this 5-6 years of hearing this stuff. What do you expect for this person to be like and their view of black people when they come out? So yes, we challenge, and again, I'm not a black woman, so my experience is different. But yes, we challenge when it takes place in the masajid and in these institutes, but we must challenge it from the tradition aspect.
Also, forgive me, can I add something as well? Pardon me, yes. Is that okay? Right, like Brother Mamadou, I'm not a woman, but at the end of the day, I've got a beautiful wife and I've got a lovely daughter and nieces and volunteers that work with me. I'm a big advocate that Black Muslim women shouldn't always have to rely on so-called Muslim organizations that are run by other communities. We have the competencies, we've got the intelligence, we've got the capabilities to establish our own spaces. Thankfully, alhamdulillah, there's numerous, if you go online, including our beloved sister Sakina from the Black Muslim Forum, we've got numerous platforms for Black Muslim women. So if any Black Muslim woman is going through any issues, there are numerous Black Muslim women platforms that they can align themselves to. If they don't know them, feel free to get my details. I will give you them, because we have to understand this. Islam is just as much our religion as any. So we shouldn't always be looking to other communities to cater for us. They're not my mother and fathers. You understand what I'm saying? I've got my mother and I got my father. And if I need something to do for my community, for my family, I'm not going to other communities to beg. I'm going to do it myself or get other like-minded people like my homeboy Rakeem, who's here. And then we put the money together and we do what we have to do. I believe we need to get out of the mind state of being begging bowls. We're not for other communities. We don't need other communities to do anything for us. We've got the capabilities, we've got the people, we've got the expertise to do things ourselves. And we need to be in that mindset. Do for self. We're not beggy of other communities. Do for self. And we've got many capable people. Our sister Rashida, we have sister Sakina. We've got many other people. We've got Brother Rakeem. who could help and support. Sorry.
Yes, no, thank you so much. And I just want to touch on a question that was answered by text, Ismael, if I could get you to answer this for our viewers also on Facebook. The question was, how do Black Muslims, especially in the West, for a lack of a better term, grapple with legacy of slavery, both in the Islamic tradition and transatlantic slave trade?
Now, in my opinion, we have to acknowledge that slavery did exist within the Muslim context, within the Muslim communities, as well as the transatlantic slavery by the West. I believe we need to acknowledge it, but at the same time, we need to acknowledge that we have a great history before slavery and a great history after slavery. And during slavery, there have been many trailblazers who excelled in society, who overcame slavery and became trailblazers, i.e., for example, Malik Ambar from India. He was in slavery in India, and then when he brought himself out of slavery, he then became the governor of India, okay? And then we have people like Nani of the Maroons. According to Dr. Afroz from Bangladesh, she's done some research that Nani of the Maroons was a Muslim woman, and she was a military general who fought against slavery in Jamaica, and she established her own country within Jamaica, Maroonland. So we need to celebrate that within slavery, there were trailblazers, there were achievers. It wasn't all doom and gloom. There were many people like Ayub bin Suleiman who made great achievements during the slavery period. And we need to celebrate people who fought against slavery. We need to celebrate we need to celebrate the positives with the negatives. And we need to learn from the Jewish community. When the Jewish community have their Holocaust celebrations, they come with the narrative, we will make sure that this will never happen again. So we as Black people in the West, we need to find ways, first of all, to work with other Black communities and come with the narrative, we will make sure that this will never happen again. But at the same time, it shouldn't all be doom and gloom because there'll be many trailblazers. Also, we need to celebrate the fact that we've survived slavery, but other communities and other people have suffered slavery too. Slavery wasn't only for Black people. White Europeans faced slavery from the Romans. Asians faced slavery from the Arabs and other communities. So other people have faced slavery too. So when we're looking at slavery, we need to look at it holistically, and at the same time, we need to look in the positives as well as the negatives.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for that.
I just add a point. Sorry, I'm going to have loads of points to add if that's possible. Unless we're running too late.
Please.
Can I come back to you, Mamadou, at the end? Only because we're running out of time, and I'm keen for us to move on to the next section, which is about the report, but I'll come back to you on that question, if that's okay. Thank you all so much for being great participants. I can see that you all have been engaging with us. We did overrun slightly. We've got another maybe 20 to 25 minutes, inshallah, for the next section. We will try to run through it as swiftly as we can, but we thank you for your participation and for your patience. And now, I'm happy to welcome back Rashida, the Assistant Secretary General of the MCB, to talk to us briefly about the MCB report about the Black Muslim experience within the UK. Rashida, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. And it's been another very amazing session and quite emotional for me most of the time, listening to the young people and sharing their experiences and what they've gone through. And I think I'm just going to go straight to talking about what the MCB is doing by trying to answer. I think there was a question in the Q&A, Sister Nada, about what the MCB is doing to address the issue of racism within the Muslim community. Pretty much, I think that's what the question was asking. Yeah.
I read out the question to you. Maybe it's a good point to start on, Sister Rashida, which is what role is the MCB playing to ensure that mosques themselves are not becoming fertile grounds for racism and discrimination against Black Muslims?
Yeah, I think the first thing is what MCB is already doing itself, that is trying to engage the community. As we all know, MCB is an umbrella body with over 500 affiliate organizations, mosques, and charities. And one thing that is very, very clear is that in order for MCB to be able to play any role MCB itself need to understand what the problem of the Muslim community is. And there is the only way to be able to do that is to engage. And that's why the Proudly Muslim and Black project, it's really very important for the MCB, and it's a very viable avenue that the MCB is using to engage with the communities. And as part of that, there are specific actions that are being taken. I've heard a lot of people talk about the fact that we're tired of talking. There needs to be some actions, and actions can only happen when you understand what you want to take actions on. And that is why the very first thing that the MCB did was to have the Proudly Muslim and Black Initiative Conference in 2019. Even though we started on this stream of work since 2018, where we started engaging with the members of the community to find out what it is that is actually causing these barriers that seem to exist between the general Muslim community, especially the South Asian Arab community and the Black Muslim community. And why is it that despite being an organization that is representative of, that is supposed to be representative of the experience of Muslim across board, regardless of their race, color, and everything, there seem to be no representation or inadequate representation of Black Muslims. Of course, there are a lot of Black Muslim, in number, not a lot, but a number of Black Muslim organizations that are affiliated to the MCB, but the number is really, really very minimal. So I think one of the first things that MCB needed to do is to be able to engage with people of like minds who actually believe that these issues should be tackled and that there should be practical steps, to address all this issue. And that was why we've been having this series of engagement with organizations that are led by Black Muslims themselves, and that led us, to the event we had in 2019. And from that event, since then, we've not stopped. There's been a lot of engagement. And so we have identified three major areas that we really want to work on, and then which we hope will lead to further works that other people can engage in, and then we can all move forward and address all these important issues that have been discussed. So right now, you will soon move to the session on the report. So we have the Proudly Muslim and Black 2020 report, although it's is called the 2020 report. We have started work on this report since 2018 in collaboration with Everyday Muslim Archive Project, and the Everyday Muslims have been doing quite a lot of work in trying to document the general Muslim experience. And when we got in contact with them and we started talking about the Black Muslim community, it became, something that we both, that is MCB as an organization and the Everyday Muslim, decided that this is a stream of work that is actually very, very important for us to take on. And as a result of that, we thought that the first thing to do is to document the experience of Black Muslims in the UK. A lot of the things that the young people have talked about today, everybody we know it, we've experienced it. But there are people, when you want to talk with policymakers or people who are important to take action, they ask you, where are the data? Where are the information? How do we get the information? So that was why this report is very important for us. And I must say that the report we're doing, the report we're putting forward is not by any means, a thorough reflection of the Black Muslim experience in the UK. It is just the beginning, and we just wanted to have a feel. And that's why when you start, hearing from people who have contributed to the report, you will see that a lot of it is about, their individual experience maybe as a professional or as an individual. And we thought when we put this together, amazing, we have over, right now as I'm speaking with you, we have over 38 contributions, and we're still, hopefully at the end of the day, we'll have about 40 contributions. And like I said, it's just the beginning. So there is still a lot of work, required in that space. And also, like, the second thing we are trying to do is put together an online portal where people can actually share things that people can refer to and get information and find out about good practices that can actually help them to do better. And of course, there is the workshops, training for mosque and affiliates that we are really working on. And you're going to hear a bit more about that from the Black Muslim Forum Sister Sakina, who has been working with us for the past few months to develop, some training with regards to racial discrimination, justice, and all those kind of topics that we intend to address. And of course, the Visit My Mosque is a very good project of the MCB, which is also a way to actually encourage communities to come together and to stop discriminating. So there are a lot of things you can find out about the MCB if you go to the MCB website about what we're doing and how we're trying to ensure that the communities are brought together in unity to progress together. And I want to use that opportunity to also say that it is not, we cannot achieve anything if we think we want to work in isolation. It's good for us to have our own spaces. I absolutely encourage that. And as Black Muslims, we should be doing things for ourselves, but at the same time, we should be collaborating. We should be working with, the people, our South Asian and Arab brothers to actually come to terms with all these issues and address them. And as part of that, I want to encourage as many of you that are here today, organization, please join the MCB as an affiliate, and let's see how we can work together. MCB is an umbrella body. A lot of this work it cannot do on its own, but it can actually support individual organizations who have, specific work streams that they are working on to achieve what we are all hoping for. That is a joint development and eradicate, discrimination, anti-Blackness, and all these negative words from our society. And so I'll hand over back to, I think I've run over, sorry, Sister Nada, so you can go on to talk about the report as well as the anti-Blackness workshops.
Thank you so much, Rashida. No, you've raised many good points, and I'll just touch upon quickly to add on to what you've said. So with the report, we try to work with community contributors from across sectors, and the sectors that we've been able, alhamdulillah, to cover are the next 10 that are shown on this slide. So it's arts and heritage. We've covered a reflection on the impact of BLM, criminal justice, education, employment, health and well-being, media, politics, religion, and sport. And alhamdulillah, the report has had a great number of contributors. However, like Sister Rashida said, it's just a starting point for all the work that's required to combat anti-Blackness in both the British and the Muslim communities. So without further ado, I'd like to invite 4 of the contributors who have helped us both lead the report and shape the contributions within the report. We'll start off with Sadia Ahmed, who has been involved in Proudly Muslim and Black for a long time, actually represents everyday Muslims. And she's been involved in the report in particular as both a lead editor and a contributor in the arts and heritage section. Welcome, Sadia.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Rashida, because I think you've covered a lot of what I needed to say, so that's great. You've covered the reasons why we're doing the report, and also why I'm here, really. you know, why are we working together? How did this relationship happen? And so we've been working together for the past 2 years now, since an email I got from Rashida saying that she wants to work with the MCB. I had my reservations about the MCB, which I think a lot of them have really been covered throughout the day. But it was really Rashida's conviction in what she wanted to do, and really it was parallel to the work that we were already doing with the Black Muslim community through the Heritage Project, which was the real reason why I chose to get on board. And we've been working on all the events, on the community briefings, the event in Parliament, the 2 symposiums that we've done. And it all really stemmed from really wanting to do this report. And my section in the report is really looking at the framing and documenting of Black Muslim history in Britain. And a lot of it's actually been touched upon by what Brother Ismael said, and also what Brother Mustafa Briggs said yesterday. And it's really about how, when we're looking at archives and history, if it's from a very singular perspective, it means it can be from a very biased and narrow focus. And the effects, the negative effects of this on people in the community, I think they both really articulated that very well. And that is of subjugation, misinformation, and the building of negative stereotypes. So the stereotypes and the misrepresentation in the Islamic history is a really integral point, because this representation is then filtered through, and it is what is taught by scholars, and therefore it's interpreted and it's ingested as being the truth. And I think in the past few years, especially through the work Mustafa's doing, he's been able to dispel and re-educate, and also and Sakina and the Nana Asuma School and the Black Muslim Forum, the re-education of what they've done through the little things on social media has been really integral in changing and re-educating people in terms of Black presence within Islamic history. And that's something that we've been trying to do at Everyday Muslim, but on a community level. Lost my thread, sorry. So through the reinterpretation and actual representation of history, of Muslim history, we wanted, through the Explore Your Own Heritage project that we did, exploring the diversity of Black Muslims in history and heritage, by collecting oral history interviews, photographs. We wanted to create a direct and responsible and personal account of civic, social and cultural experiences and challenges that the Black Muslim and Afro-Caribbean community have been through. The archive collection consists of 400 items of oral history interviews, photographs, transcripts of the interviews. We also created curriculum-related educational resources. So we as a wider community can then begin to learn about each other, respect each other, and have better knowledge of each other, who we are and where we come from. And really what we want to do is to, like what Mustafa is doing, is to re-educate the community and be able to teach each other about who we are, and to be able to give a better representation of the community as a whole community. From that misrepresentation, it's also very prevalent in the way in which we learn about our own history in schools, especially in Britain. And this quote from Benjamin Zephaniah is really, it really kind of hones into how we feel about history and how it's taught and how we represent ourselves as a community. So Benjamin says, it seems to be there's a problem with my video. I'm not sure what's going on, but Benjamin said, anyway, I wasn't interested in history at school because I was being taught that Black people had no history. We were usually being discovered by great white explorers.
I'm not sure what happened there. Sister Sadia, if you're still with us. Apologies, we seem to be having some technical issues, but thank you so much for what you've shared with us, Sister Sadia, about your contribution and the importance of documenting the contributions of Black Muslims in Britain. Jazakallah khair. I'll now ask Brother Shams Miwa to give us a short overview of his contribution to the Employment Working Group. Brother Shams, over to you.
Your microphone, please. Brother Shams, your microphone.
Brother Shams, would you like to turn on your microphone? Thank you. It's still, can you try speaking? No, apologies, we can't hear you still. Do you want to have a look? And what I'll try and do is I'll come back to you if that's okay. I'll move on to Sister Munira Williams, who has participated in 2 sectors of the report with a reflection on BLM and also sport. Sister Munira, are you with us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Brother Shams, do you want to go on? And I'll come back to Sister Munira.
Oh, okay then. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. I really want to thank everyone. It's been very exciting. And we all have the same story or similar stories. I want to thank all the young people and say sorry that you are going through what you're going through. But I've got good news for you. Inshallah, things will be better. You just need to be strong. Okay, you need to be strong and things will continue to get better. So my contribution, looking at following on from the last speaker, documenting what has happened, and the whole purpose of my paper also is to document where we are today economically within the Black Muslim community. Generally, there are 5 categories where, if you want to be successful as a community, there are 5 areas where we need to concentrate on. We need to be in charge of the welfare of our people. We need to promote high quality education in the community. We need to have control over the media narrative, especially if you don't tell your story, other people will tell it for you the way they would like. We need to be engaged politically and be able to carry out the vision of the community through politics. And finally, you need to be economically successful. You need to take control of your own economy. And especially the economy then filters down to support all of those things we have highlighted. That means it's the economic power that then helps with the welfare, that helps to build educational institutions, that help to support the media and help to promote ourselves in the politics. So that's why I've looked at these, and I've been a member of this community for well over 20 years. And there are so many things that I've done along the way. I've helped many people in setting up their businesses, providing administration for their business, helping with HR, helping with documentation, helping with compliance. Okay, and these are generally people from within the Black Muslim community, and therefore I've been able to access them and speak to them about what they feel where we are today within the British community. Now, this report that I've put together, I've looked at the demographic structure of the Black community and the Black Muslim community. I've looked at how we've transitioned from our various background or various country or continents to the UK, how we have come over various waves. And I looked at how that has impact on how we have started to evolve economically, how we've started building businesses, And interestingly, many of those who migrated to the UK were some of the waves that came, they were actually middle class, they were professionals, and they came to the UK. They had to start all over again. Some of them had to reacquire their professionalism, etc. And the challenges they face through that process. Of course, some other people also came from a poor background, and they had to come fleeing wars and all that. And that also impact on how they integrated in the society, or how they started to evolve economically. A lot of the issues that I discovered that we have is about attitude. So many people came in with the attitude of you almost think like a second-class citizen. Oh, you are not allowed to. Oh, we don't want to start doing business. You just want to work for someone. Many people came in without some qualifications, and even those who came with qualifications felt inferior, and they had to start all over again. Some people came in with a temporary mindset. We're only here for 10 years. We're only here for 7 years. We'll soon be gone. And therefore, such people don't think about the future. They don't think that they'll be here in another 20 years or in another 50 years. They don't think that they will have generations that will succeed them. So what is the succession plan? What are they building for the future? How are they supporting their children or their grandchildren for the future? So a lot of these is about attitude, and how that attitude has not helped. Some of the other issues there is about trust. Within the Black communities, there is a lack of trust, and also there are internal competitions among Black people. So we don't support ourselves in our business. We don't promote our own businesses, etc.
No, I agree. And thank you so much, Brother Shams, for sharing with us. And I agree with all the points that you've made. And I hope that this quick preview that you've given us will encourage others to look at the report and maybe learn from some of the shared experiences that you've documented within your contribution. So Jazakallah khair, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. We'll now move on to Sister Munira Williams, who will give us a quick overview of her contribution in both as a reflection of BLM. Sister Munira, apologies, but there might be an issue with your sound. I'm not able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, awesome. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for inviting me. Can I just ask approximately how much time I have?
2 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
I apologize. I apologize. We have run over the time, so if you can be as swiftly as you usually are, that would be amazing.
I'm not normally swift, but that's fine. So my name is Munira. I was asked to come here as a critical friend of MCB to talk about the 2 contributions that I made to the report. Essentially, one was called Thrive and one was called Complicit. So speaking about Thrive was about a personal journey, my way into sports, how I managed to get into sports, and just the sort of, not so much the practicalities of that, but the experience of taking up space. What does it mean to be a Black Muslim woman, a woman of size who takes up space, and having to challenge some of the notions of other people, particularly in cycling, who just don't think that you're supposed to be there. In the moment where we're talking about Black Lives Matter, and we're talking about just physical mattering, what does it mean to thrive, to flourish, and to prosper? The second report which I did, or the second piece that I contributed, was called Complicit. And essentially that was looking at the Muslim community in England as a whole, and looking at how other communities have been complicit to the devaluation of Black people and Black people's life. It was a sort of post George Floyd reflection, and it was people were asking questions like, how did we get here? What is this? How did we get to this point where a man has lost his life? But this is nothing new. People have been losing their lives, and so I'm looking at how do we get to this point? How have communities been complicit, and essentially what can be done now? Now I know I've only got 2 minutes, but I'll just say quickly. Something that I think is really important in thinking about the whole complicity thing is, how do we move on beyond complicity? How do we then get to a point where there is some form of, I guess, restoration, or some form of like some form of equity within the space in which we exist. And I agree with many people who have said it's not about Black people being begging, and Black people haven't been begging. So to all of the Black folk here, I'm so proud of you because I see all of your accomplishments. Ismael, Hafsa, Mamadou, you know, everyone who spoke, Gibran, Abdul Kareem, Nada, I see all of your accomplishments, and we are doing so well. And so that leads me to the point where I say, and so for those of you who want to be allies unto us, may we work together, may we contribute together. But the questions that or the statement or the sentiments that I have is that really, if you see that there are Black people who are a bit distrusting of what you are doing, realize that this is rooted in something, and this is something that needs to be explored more. This is something that needs to be talked about a bit more. We can't explore this in a 2-minute, but actually it is a case of we have gotten this far. We have done so much. We have always known our value and always known our worth. So we're asking the questions, well, what does looking together like? What do we get from this? Because we've already come this far. And until we are able to have those conversations about our value, until we are able to have those conversations, nothing much is going to happen. And so this is a really good step. This is really moving forward from the point where we were before. But I guess what I really want to say is that this isn't something that would take a short period of time. This is something that is embedded in, you know, the misrepresentation of Black people, or the lack of representation of Black people is an erasure. So when I'm on the streets and people see that I'm Black and I'm Muslim, people don't know. This is because we have been erased. It's not a passive thing, it's an active thing. So now we need to actively come together as communities, and we need to listen to each other, but also listen to the distrust of Black people, listen to the fact that we know our value. And so when we come to you, we're like, okay, so what does that look like? What do we get from this? Where is the equity? How do we build from here? I know that's more than 2 minutes, but I can't really go into much more than that. But just to say thank you very much, MCB, for inviting me. I am a critical friend to you, and I will be here if you need me again.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Munira. That was amazing, beautifully delivered, and I'm so excited to read both your contributions. Our final contributor for this is Abdulrahim Saeed, who has participated in the media section and would share a quick overview of his contribution. Brother Ismail, similar to Munira, if I can encourage you to utilize 2 minutes to just give us a quick overview of your contribution, that will be much appreciated. And for all our participants, thank you so much for being patient with us and still tuning in. I hope you're finding it useful. Abdulrahim. As we wait for Brother Abdulrahim to get on. He seems to be having some difficulties accessing. That's fine. What I can say about Brother Abdulrahim's contribution is that it's based on his career as a journalist. So I think it's quite important piece, and it really adds value to the report, which inshallah will be launched in November. So I hope you all check it out. So now we'll just move on to the next section, which is just reiterating some of the points that Rashida covered earlier, which is about what is next for the Proudly Muslim and Black project. So what we have is, we've got the report, which is launching inshallah next month in November. And then following that, what we have is we will have also, we're working on a online resource portal. This online resource portal will cover things like policy briefings and anti-racist education resources, and we hope that it becomes a community resource where Muslim organizations and individuals will use to both aid their own research as well as dealing with the wider British community. We will also have workshops and events along the theme of racial justice to continue the work that we've started with this conference and the report. And I'd like to have our final speaker, which is Sukaina Osei Bondo, to briefly discuss the planned workshops and events by MCB and the Black Muslim Forum. Sukaina, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. I just wanted to say a big thank you to all those that took part in this conference, which has been such an inspirational and eye-opening event. I'll just quickly brief you on an exciting project happening in the coming months. Black Muslim Forum has partnered with MCB, Everyday Muslim, and the Civil Service Muslim Network, as well as other stakeholders, to deliver tour anti-racism modules open to the Muslim public and Muslim organizations to educate the British Muslim Ummah on what it means to be an actively anti-racist Muslim. So this initiative has come about through several interlinking factors, the strongest of them being that our community simply cannot continue on with the deep-rooted issues that are going unaddressed and unscrutinized by non-Black Muslims. It's come about from the understanding that the racist state of the British Muslim Ummah is absolutely, completely unacceptable, and something needs to be done about it on a national and structural scale in the UK. The vision of these training modules is to develop a British Muslim community that is well-informed, sensitive to, and in support of the Black struggle in the UK, and to increase the incentive for British Muslims to become actively anti-racist in their own subjective capacities. So as Mamadou said, the time for talk is done now, and we need pragmatic and sincere action on the part of non-Black Muslims in Britain to undo the damage they have inflicted on the Black community. So anti-racist work and being a practicing Muslim are not mutually exclusive, and part and parcel of being a steward on this earth is having the sustained integrity and mission to call out oppression, whatever its form, and stand with the oppressed. And I acknowledge that despite acknowledging that the onus should be on Black Muslims, on non-Black Muslims to provide anti-racist education, we have, as Black Muslims and other non-Black Muslim allies, we've collaborated over the last few months to bring the community a training program comprised of 3 modules to, inshallah, revolutionize the way non-Black Muslims situate themselves in conversations about race and provide them with pragmatic tools to be actively anti-racist in every capacity, as should be the norm, and also to revive the prophetic sunnah of anti-racist action. So these modules will be 2 adult modules and 1 youth module. The modules will end with a pledge and a certificate to acknowledge attendance, lessons learned, and support for an allyship with the Black struggle. These modules will be publicized on MCB and Black Muslim Forum social networks in the coming months. So please keep a lookout and spread the word in order to change the narrative surrounding anti-Black racism in the British Muslim Ummah.
Jazakallah khair. Sukaina, thank you so much for that. And just finally, as Sukaina mentioned, we've got a lot in the works, and this will only happen with the support of the community. So just to wrap up, I'd like to remind everyone that, inshallah, the report will be launched next month. Please look out for the launch announcement on the MCB social media platforms and website. Jazakumullah khair for joining us. We hope that you found the session stimulating and of benefit, and we hope that you've enjoyed the different topics that we've covered today. I'd like to extend our thanks to all our speakers and young contributors. They've been fantastic and raised very important points and insights. I'd also like to thank our delivery partners today. Without them, this conference would not have happened. And I'd also like to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I understand it's a Saturday night, so we're all busy. It's been a pleasure and a privilege for me to host you tonight. Please keep interacting with us through the MCB social media platforms and the website, and let us know if you'd like to get involved with us at the MCB Proudly Muslim and Black project. Let's keep the conversation going beyond Black History Month and keep an eye out for our next workshops and events. Jazakumullahu khairan again for joining us. Finally, I'd like to just end with a dua. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. This was Nada Isa. It was a pleasure to host you today. Jazakumullah khair. We'll finally just try spoken word performance by Aziza Hassan, who we feel sums up this whole event. Thank you so much for being with us today. Apologies, we're just having some technical issues, subhanAllah. Today we've tried our best. I think it's just starting.
Privilege. A special right, advantage, or immunity granted only to a particular person or a group. To sit in a bubble of your own, safe and comfortable in your home, too engrossed to see that we are stuck in an endless loop. Indulging in the fruit of ignorance, caught up in a cycle of mindlessness, wrapped up in a blanket of indifference, convinced by the illusion of innocence. So you shut your eyes and you deny, and you say it's ambiguous. Blame it on their insolence, their violence. Don't you see that your silence and denial of this bias from the desire to survive is vital in this painful, hurtful, regretful cycle? Maybe if I hide away, I'm sure it won't even last a day. Cover it up with a different name, shoot it and hang it up in a frame. Stand up and take your aim, because to you, their life is a game. The thought of giving up this hoarded power held in your palms as they raise their arms yet continue to be killed hour by hour. Will you tell me that that is life? That the right to live and to breathe is not so much a right as it is a privilege. A privilege. A special right, advantage, or immunity granted only to a particular person or a group. And in that group is you.